common mistakes that people kind of run into when thinking about validating startup ideas. The first one is, and this is the most common one, a lot of people just think they don't need to validate their idea. And this comes in a lot of different ways. There are some people who are just like, oh, I just know this is a good idea. It's obviously a good idea. I don't need to validate it. I know it's a good idea. Sometimes people are like, they're working on an idea in a field that they've worked in a long time, and they're like, oh, I know this field really well. I know this is kind of a thing. And look, I'm sure this has worked out for some people, but the vast majority of people that I know, 99% of them kind of thing, what they thought their startup was about and what they thought people need was not what they actually needed at the end of the day. I always kind of joke with startups when I talk to them. I'm like, oh, how far are you into kind of the startup process? And they're like, oh, we're like 3 months in. I was like, okay, cool. What you're working on now is going to be completely different 3 months from now. And I think the reason why this is the case is that the world is very complicated, and human beings especially are complicated. And I think there's a little bit of arrogance to kind of think that we can kind of predict what they want and why they want these things. Maybe you're much smarter than me, but I can tell you for a fact, Brian and I thought this all the time, that we were kind of like, could figure it out. And one of the very first things we learned is that we don't know anything, and we don't know when we can't predict what people are. And so we got to validate those things. And so first common mistake here, and it's the most common, is people think they don't need to validate when they actually do. And to be honest, in all cases, I can't think of a case where somebody should not validate. Brian and I, when starting companies, validate everything. It doesn't matter what it is. We've been doing this for 18 years. It doesn't matter. We do it every time. Okay, the second most common mistake is confirmation bias. And what this basically means is people interpret evidence as supportive of what they already believe. And look, I'm guilty of the first mistake, and I'm guilty of the second mistake. There are some ideas that I was just so excited about and so passionate about, and I just wanted it to be true so badly that any sort of evidence I got, I could tell a story about how it supported the fact that the idea was great. It would just be really funny conversations with Brian and I. We would like run some test, and we would get some result back, and it was like, I don't know, 2 people signed up, and I'm like, see, Brian, 2 people signed up. And he'd be like, yo, it's 2 people. And I looked at their emails, we know both of them, right? And this is just a common thing that kind of like happens. You can look up confirmation bias. It's a psychological kind of thing, and it happens a lot in startups, especially when validating ideas. And look, I get it. People get excited about starting companies. I'm excited about starting companies. I'm excited you're watching this and excited about starting companies. And so you just want the idea to kind of work so that you can start a company and kind of do all the exciting things that you kind of hope for. This is dangerous, and I'll kind of go into deeper detail about why this is dangerous to kind of skip validation or have confirmation bias. It's something you want to watch out for. You want to be skeptical. You want to kind of like question everything. Okay, the third part here, which is kind of similar to confirmation bias, I feel like, but not always the same, is sometimes people just have really low bars for what is compelling evidence. I feel like I've talked to some people who are like, 3 of my friends said they would pay I'm thinking about working on, so it must be a good idea. And first of all, they're friends, so I don't know how much I trust them. And, I can kind of talk 3 people into anything. Literally, I could probably try to find 3 people and I could talk them into how the world is, the sky is red or something like that, right? Like, it's just kind of like a low bar for this. And you want to have a high bar for working on and for validating, because look, you're going to spend a lot of your time. Just to make this point very clear, think about working on an idea for potentially a year, thinking about quitting your job for that idea, think about not making any money for the year. More so than not making money, you are probably going to put money into the company, and think about how big of a thing those are. And then think about making a decision like that based off of 3 of your friends just saying them, right? Kind of doesn't make any sense. You wouldn't make big life decisions on so little evidence in any other parts of your life. You shouldn't make it here. So these are 3 most common mistakes. First one, people think they don't need to validate when they really should. Confirmation bias, people interpreting evidence as supportive of what they already believe. And then the third part here is just having a low bar for what is compelling evidence.